was just going to ask about that too. Great. So I will go ahead and get us started. As Lillian just said, we are recording the meeting and we'll get it posted on the internet for future generations to watch our brilliant work. So I apologize for the last minute change in the agenda last night. Oh, and I'm going to ask if you can mute your phones when you're not talking. That'll help reduce feedback. Thank you. So we'll go over, see, Kelly has not yet joined us, so we'll wait to welcome her when she has joined us. Kelly Poe is from Eastern Oregon, is that correct, Sue?
Yes, yes, she's from Ontario.
Excellent. And so she will be officially voted onto the committee on this Thursday at the full Early Learning Council meeting. And then we have, so we'll welcome Kelly when she gets here. We have our final look at the implementation charter in a little bit to discuss about what happened at the council meeting. And then we'll look at our 6-month work plan for our committee, as well as take a look at what other committees might be sending us, and then that'll tee up our discussion around the relief nursery rules that got added to our agenda last night. And if we have some time, we'll look at the language and translation policy, because that seems like a pretty relevant topic for the equity committee. Does anybody have any questions or additions that they would like to see on the agenda? I'll give everybody a minute to unmute. Okay. I am, oh, Lenny says, welcome Kelly P. She's famous out east. Wow, famous people are joining our committee. Excellent. Fantastic. So I'll go ahead and see that we have Alyssa from the Early Learning Division is joining us to answer questions about various work plans. Carmen, hi, how are you? Lenny is here, and Kim Parker, Sue, and myself. And then I'll try to keep track of who else joins us when they do and acknowledge that they've joined us.
Hi, Eva, this is Sadie from Latino Network. I'm also on the call.
Oh, great! Thank you, Sadie. I didn't see you on the list, so I didn't know you had joined. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
For sure. I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing all right. So we have the Equity Implementation Committee Charter. There was much discussion about it, but it has been approved for 6 months. The largest part of the discussion was around the part where we struggled the most, which was around what does our role look like for the RFP process, like on RFPs, where we had the largest discussion in January. Lillian, do you mind scrolling down to that part of the charter? We don't have to discuss it today, but we can sit and think on it. the grant and RFP, yeah, the second page.
Can you see it now?
I think we've had a few other people on their phone too. No, it says purpose statement. There it is, review grant making and request for proposals. So this section got the most amount of conversation, just like for, and I think it reflected some of the conversation that we had as well, where we struggled to figure out what exactly our role is in it. So we'll be reviewing this piece in 6 months. We'll review the whole charter to see how it's working and how this piece particularly might work. And all of the committee's charters will be reviewed at that time, not just ours. I think it was an interesting conversation, and I think what it highlighted was that each committee has a slightly different role, and we're not all looking at the same thing, or we don't all have the same type of work in front of us, and I think that the challenge in the council looking at our charter reflected how each committee views their own work and how we all fit in and work together. So if you have thoughts particularly on this review of grant making and request for proposals piece, we'll have plenty of opportunity to talk about it over the next few months, but I wanted to give you a heads up that that's the main focus. As well, I think there was a little bit of question about the target population too, and how it either builds upon or contradicts what's already in statute. So we may need to come back and talk about that a little bit more as well. Sue or Lillian, do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, you did a great job of summarizing the council discussion, and I just want to emphasize what you just said, Eva, about all 4 standing committees, their charters and sort of the operating rules will be reviewed by the council at our retreat in September. So I think that will give us an opportunity to just try to build in some consistency among the standing committees. And the only other thing I would say is that, the council is also developing a list of overall guiding principles. And one category of the population that we added was foster care children. And that's an example of where we may want your purpose statement 6 months from now to reflect that.
Yes, thank you. I knew I was forgetting one piece. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? All right. I want to thank everybody for your work and thoughtfulness on putting this together. I am really proud of what we've achieved here, and yeah, I look forward to us getting it approved again in September. Okay, does anybody have any additional comments before I move on? You can send me a chat. No. Has anybody else joined us on the phone?
This is Joyce Harris.
Hi, how are you?
Hello, Miss Joyce.
Eva?
This is Eva.
Yeah, who else is on the call?
We have Lillian, Alyssa from the Early Learning Division, Carmen, myself, Lenny, Kim Parker from the Early Learning Division, and Sue Miller, and Sadie
All
is also
right.
on the phone.
Okay.
So thank you for joining us.
Good morning, everybody.
So yeah, did you catch what the conversation about the committee charge?
No, I didn't.
Okay, so summarizing really quick, we have an approved charter for 6 months, and all of the committees will be bringing their charters to the Early Learning Council retreat in September, where all charters will get a review and possible edit. And then the biggest question around our charter was around the grant making, and we all struggled a little bit too to figure out what our role was with that.
Right.
So, so the biggest piece that they'll look at in September.
Okay.
So I'll go ahead and move us on to the equity, or our 6-month work plan, and these work as well. So it's part of our looking at what committee it does and how we all work together to support the work of the full council. Sue asked us to come up with a 6-month work plan so we can figure out where what things might other committees need to bring to us when, by us meaning the equity committee, and then how we fit into that so that we're not making last-minute requests or realizing that we should have weighed in on a conversation before it's too late. Right. So you should have received on Friday the various work plans, including ours. And you'll see that for today it said review draft from Measuring Success, the key body of hub work. They ask us to push that until April, and then review draft rules from the Child Care and Education Committee on the relief nurseries, which we got last night, which because you got them so late, we were not going to be able to take a big dive into those today, but at least have some sort of practice for what we'll be looking at. So our work plan is essentially based off of what other is for their work plan, so that we can figure out how we fit in. One of the big concerns that I think we heard from other committees was our request in our charter to review their work and have a and not just be a stamp of approval, but to really make sure that equity is being applied to all of the policies that we're putting forward. And I think they weren't concerned so much about that piece, but just like how does it fit into the timeline. So that's why we now have our draft work plan that's based off of other committees' work plans. Does anybody have any questions about that so far?
Eva, this is Sue. Could I just want to add that this was sort of a place to begin because the other committees had put their work plans together. And so I think it's important that this committee know we're also really encouraging the committee to come up with their own action items, that aren't just based on the other committee's work. So, and this is very first rough draft, so I don't want people on this committee to think that they're, limited by what other committees are doing.
Thank you. Yes, I should have made that clear too. That we will definitely have our own work to fit into this as well. Alyssa just sent me a note that Kelly Poe has joined us. Hi, Kelly. Thank you for joining, and thanks for joining the Equity Committee as well.
Thank you. Sorry it took me a while to get the right phone number to dial in.
Oh, no worries. I'll have to show people how to do the computer too. So if you have good internet connections, you can connect via the computer and not have to worry about phones too. But we can do that another day. And then also if you have cameras on your computers, then we can see each other's faces. So we're just going over the work plan.
Sorry, can I interrupt 1 second? It might be wise to have Kelly introduce herself a little bit, since
there are
some people on the phone who haven't worked with her yet.
Yeah, Lenny says that you're famous, so out east. So you should tell us a little bit about how you're famous.
I'm not famous, not maybe infamous. So I used to be with the Commission on Children and Families. That's my old Lenny days. The Commission on Children and Families in Malheur County, and currently I am employed with the Malheur Education Service District, and we are the backbone organization for the Eastern Oregon Community-Based Services Hub, and we have the Early Learning Hub designation for Baker, Malheur, and Wallowa counties. What else do you want to know? That's probably enough.
Great, thank you. We'll figure. Oh, and Carmen is also suggesting that we do introductions. Thank you, Carmen. Thanks everybody for keeping me on track with like appropriate introductions. Carmen, do you want to start? She must. Oh, there she is.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can now. Yes.
Awesome. Sorry, I'm doing GoToMeeting on my phone for the first time, and it's a new adventure.
Oh, yeah.
I'm Carmen Ellis. I am the training coordinator for Child Care Resource and Referral of Multnomah County.
Thank you. Ms. Joyce, would you like to go?
Sure. Joyce Harris. I'm manager of community engagement at Education Northwest, and previously I was director of the Region 10 Equity Assistance Center for 21 years here at Education Northwest. And so I have a strong background in equity, specifically related to disparities, civil rights, race, gender, and national origin equity. And that includes the preschool world.
Thank you. Lenny, would you like to do an introduction?
Sure, Eva. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Hello, Kelly. Good to see you, hear your voice again. Some of you may know I was involved with the local Commission on Children and Families in Clackamas County from '83 to about '95, and I went to Salem for DHS for about a decade. And along the way, I taught school again, worked in residential care again, and now I work for the Gladstone School District, where we have a pretty entrepreneurial, innovative district, both on the early learning side as well as the early adolescence side. My job ranges everything from Title I to the equity chair to ready for kindergarten, ready for high school. There's a whole bunch of activities we're doing in our little school district to make sure that, well, our motto is growing great people.
Great, thank you. Sadie?
Sure. Good morning. My name is Sadie Feibel-Holmes, and I'm the Director of Early Childhood Programs for Latino Network, and I've been here for about 10 years. Before that, I worked for Self-Enhancement for about 6 years, working with youth and families in school-based programs.
Great, thank you. And I'm Eva Ripito. My day job is Political Coordinator at AFSCME Council 75, and I got I was going to say roped into the Early Learning Council because of that role, where we represent licensed in-home child care providers and a few of the Head Starts around the state. And so I've been on the council since 2012. Alyssa will correct me if I said that wrong, because she's had to send me the date several times. And then recently was voted on to be the interim acting chair for the equity committee, because I will be taking, and I said interim because in about 4.5 weeks I'll be taking maternity leave. And then Bobby Weber has just joined us to help us go over the relief nursery rules.
I'm a few minutes early, so I'll just listen.
Staff, would you like to introduce yourselves to Kelly as well, and others who might not know you yet? We have Lillian and Alyssa and Kim with us today.
Well, hi, my name is Lillian Green. I'm the Equity Director for the Early Learning Division, and I also staff this committee. So my job ranges from looking at the internal and external equity policies and initiatives for the division, and then supporting those initiatives and policies, and then our internal practices and external practices across the state. So super excited to be here.
Hi, everybody. This is Kim Parker.
Go ahead, Kim.
Sorry, was that?
No, go for it.
I am the Chief of Staff with the Early Learning Division, so I kind of have my nose poked into just about everything and work to support processes, contracting, and anything else anybody needs.
Thanks for joining us today, Kim.
Hi, it's Alyssa Chatterjee. I am the Early Learning Council Administrator. So I work with the Early Learning Council and support the staff working with all of the council's committees. And the strategic plan work is really our first attempt at making sure everybody understands what each other is doing and ways that we can intersect where necessary to kind of get the most bang for our buck with these committees. But yeah, nice to be here.
Great, thank you, Alyssa. Thanks, everybody. Okay, so we've done proper introductions. So work plan, we'll move the key body of hub work from measuring success to April, and then we'll also be looking at, we'll have Bobby or somebody join us from CCEC again next month to review the Spark rules, it looks like.
Eva, this is Sue again.
Yes.
This is a good example of why this is very drafty, because I think that the Spark rules are going to be pushed out some because the relief nursery rules need to get wrapped up in April. So I don't, and Bobby, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think Spark is going to be a focal point in April.
Okay, we have more time to move with that. So perhaps, you know, as we look at this, we'll build into our agenda then instead of the Spark rules in April, we'll look at the key body of hub work, and if we don't get to the translation piece today, we'll look at that in April as well, and then take a deeper dive into our work plan to see what else may be coming up. You may remember from our charter that we have that we could invite community partners to talk about various policies that they may be working on. So if we have space in an agenda, I would like to build that in and start practicing that. But of course, the council work will always take precedence over that. Does anybody have anything that they would like to see that should go on to our work plan that is around or any questions about what's currently on there as far as like policy agendas and tasks and when they might be appearing on our work plan?
Hi, Eva. This is Lillian. I would like to suggest, well, for one, when we developed the framework for our work plan, we went through our charge and identified those key areas within the charge. So all of these areas should correspond with specific things that were asked to do within our charge. And I think also if once everyone has the opportunity to review this, I would love possibly next meeting if you would like to kind of bring this back up so we can possibly fill in some of those like kind of policy areas, especially for 1.0. And then as we look to the bottom and like you were talking about concerning the kind of possible community members or organizations wanting to come in, if we can brainstorm what that could possibly look like, that would be helpful when fleshing this out.
Yes. Yeah, I just didn't know if there would be anything immediately that people saw a need for. But I think that is a great plan. Thank you.
Hey, Eva, this is Lenny again.
Hi, Lenny again.
I'm looking. I downloaded the March 21 version of the work plan, and
Yes.
I'm looking forward to several pieces of it. I'm just curious, do you or Lillian or the full council have a sense of these 15 different tasks I think there are? Any of those rank ordered in priority, or is the timeline sequence kind of reflective of priorities?
I think it is the timeline that is the reflection of the priorities. Somebody else can correct me if my assumption is wrong.
I would say that, and as well are any additional kind of deadlines that we have. So for these items, so if we have any state or federal deadlines that we have to complete, I do believe all of the additional committees, they're working to like develop a timeline that corresponds with that, so that we can have opportunities to review and then also meet those timelines, which pushes things up to like prioritize as items. And there could be a moment where something is placed on our agenda that we weren't quite aware of, but due to a series of events, something may fall on our agenda that is not currently in the timeline. So kind of depending on if there's any surprises or anything that we may need to review within a timely manner to support the body of work of the Division and Council, we try to reflect that within the timeline.
That makes sense to me, Lily, and I'm just curious, given that in the evolution of committees over the years and given the reality of our work, getting it all done sometimes is tough.
Yes.
Yes, that's true.
Great. If nothing's jumping out that needs to be added immediately, we'll go right on into the relief nursery rules. So Bobby or staff, do you want to present those?
Okay, so I assume you have already, this is Bobby, that you have already alerted people that this is a developmental period for us as we try to learn how our committees sync with one another. And so this is not the way we would intend to be bringing things from CCEC to Child Care and Education Committee to the Equity Implementation Committee, but I guess I would just describe it as a part of growth and and keep going. So what's happening right now is that the Child Care and Education Committee is reviewing rules that will guide the early learning division's work with relief nurseries. So I think one of the questions I have is there anybody on the equity committee who does not know what a relief nursery is in Oregon or anything about their history? Because I think we need to be sure everybody's got at least some shared base information about relief nurseries. So do you know, Eva, if everybody has some knowledge about relief nurseries?
I'll go ahead and ask.
Bobby, this is Carmen. That's a great question. Thank you. Can you tell me a little bit about how many relief nurseries there are right now and like the number of families and children that they're serving?
Those are great questions. Oh my goodness. I should have...
Sorry to put you on the spot. I just realized I know about... I feel like I know relatively well about Multnomah County, but I'm ignorant of the rest of the state in terms of that.
Right. I think there's about 17. Just let staff, is there somebody who has
really quick
right in front of you that information? Number of, it's a little confusing. They have satellites. So I assume you mean individual relief nursery sites. It may be one relief nursery, but I assume what you want to know is how many communities have a relief nursery.
That is really my question. And your answer about that they have satellites gives me information that I didn't know. So even that answer is all helpful.
Many of them have satellites.
Okay.
There are 15, according to their website, there are 15 mature relief nurseries and 8 satellite nurseries. And they are a public-private partnership, so include government funding, grants, and community donations.
Right. So one of the important things to know about relief nurseries is that they have been in Oregon for about 40 years now, I think. Anyway, for a long time, that starting with the relief nursery in Eugene, they do, as Eva just pointed out, they do rely heavily on private funding. They are required to be nonprofits, and they operated under the Commission on Children and Families until the 2012 creation of the Council and the Early Learning Division, at which time funding and managing of the contracts moved from what had been the Commission on Children and Families to the Early Learning Division. And for the first years, the contracts were maintained pretty much the way they had been maintained by the Commission. But we needed, there was all sorts of weaknesses in not having rules that were up to date and that fit the scenario that exists now. So we opened last summer, we opened a rule revision process so that we would have new rules in place before we before the Early Learning Division did the contracts for the 2017-19 biennium. And so we, the other thing I think that is helpful to know is that the relief nurseries over their years of experience have created an organization of themselves. It's called the Oregon Association of Relief Nurseries, and they have a very extensive certification process by which they
determine if an organization can meet the criteria, the standards of the model that they have created. And it's called ORN certification, and it's and so and that's been in place now for quite a while. It also includes a great deal of technical assistance for a community that is trying to create a relief nursery. So it's not so much a judgment as it is a technical support so that programs can meet the standards that are that make up the relief nursery model. And if there's anybody who doesn't know, it includes some very core characteristics. They serve families with multiple high risks, so young children and multiple high risks. So commonly the people served have mental health, drug addiction, alcohol, serious challenges to becoming the kind of family they want to be. So consequently, the model includes a number of services such as therapeutic classrooms for the children where ratios are kept small, and home visiting and parent education, and then some relief nurseries add all kinds of other services that their community is willing to support, like intensive therapy, or and I think all of them do things like help meet basic needs. So the rulemaking process is right now, the committee looked at the set of rules that you are looking at today for the first time in March, a week or so ago. And then we will be looking at them again in April. On this Thursday, we will be reporting to the Early Learning Council the issues that have to be resolved in this rulemaking process. So what we're, oh, and I think it's important that in the review process, the Child Care and Education Committee has a set of equity questions that we are reviewing the rules through, asking them, but that in no way replaces what we don't intend that to become the way we intend that our rules will come to you in a timely way in the future. What we were hoping today is that the Equity Committee could take kind of a high-level view of the rules, mainly alerting us to questions that you want either the Rules Committee or the Council itself to look at, and any concerns that you might have. So I know sometimes, I just want to say, whether we have relief nurseries or whether we fund them, those are not questions on the table at all. The questions are, what are the rules that guide the early learning divisions work with relief nurseries? Nobody is at all questioning the value of relief nurseries to the mission of the early learning division and to the, more importantly, to the well-being of children and families in Oregon. So all we're talking about is the set of rules that will guide the division's work with relief nurseries, since the state dollars, which are not the only dollars that relief nurseries use, but they're an important part of their funding. And so we want to be sure that the rules are as strong and appropriate as possible. So Eva, I would like mainly to listen and hear from the committee members concerns or questions that they have that they want to be sure the council and the CCEC think about, get information on, concerned about.
Sure. Really quick, Carmen, you had asked about number of children and families served. In a 2012 report, which was the most recent one that they had posted on their website, they being the relief nurseries. At that point, they had data from 14 of the relief nurseries, and they had served 2,156 families and 2,685 children between 2010 and 2012. So I imagine that with the increased number of relief nurseries that has and satellites, that number has also increased.
Great, thanks, Eva.
So, as Bobby said, the rules aren't to necessarily govern the relief nurseries. It's more of our the early learning division's governance of the accountability around the contracting with the relief nurseries. Is that correct, Bobby?
Yes.
Okay. So
this is Kelly.
Whatever is required that the early learning division perform well, it's statutory responsibility to contract and to monitor those contracts and be accountable.
Yeah. Kelly, you had a question or a comment?
I do. Could you send me those rules? I don't have those. I don't think I have any meeting materials that were sent out last week.
I don't know.
And my question is about the certification process that you mentioned through Oren. So my question is that certification process equitable? Do all areas of the state have equal access to implementing relief nursery programs? And I don't know if that's part of the contracting process or not.
Great questions. It's certainly an important question. I don't know that I'm able to answer it today, but I'm just going to. So do all areas of the state have equal access to relief nursery services? Is that correct?
I don't believe so.
No, I'm saying, do they have equal access to implementing? So does the certification process bar communities from becoming or implementing a relief nursery? So I remember the relief nursery certification process when we went through it in Ontario, and that was a number of years ago, and we were at the time where Oren was changing their certification process. And it was extremely difficult for us at that time, and I think that they were going to tighten up that process, which I think could be a great thing if it means that we are getting better services for families. But I'm concerned that they might be making it so some of our communities don't have even the hope of ever getting a relief nursery in their community. And that was something that I heard a lot when we were doing it in Ontario, was some of the other small counties around Malheur County were saying, we will never have a relief nursery. And I'm hoping that the certification process is making it possible that all areas of the state will be able to choose to enter into that process, that the certification is actually a welcome door, not a gate.
Okay, thank you. Are there any specific questions about when small communities believe they do not have access, they will not, I think you said will never have access?
I think funding. I think the funding, I think that there was a price you had to pay to Oren. There was actually an amount of money we had to come up with. And at the time that we did it, I think that we negotiated down to a significantly lower amount, and I don't know that, I don't know what I don't know. And so I truly am asking because I don't know. Does it still cost communities a significant amount of money to work through the certification process?
Well, it looks like they at least have to have 25% matching of what the state gives them. So there's already that.
Yep, that's reasonable. And I think that is a typical nonprofit expectation in making sure that you have a sustainability plan or you have a way of raising local dollars. My concern is that upfront dollars that you have to pay out before you ever can start serving children under the name of Relief Nursery.
Thank you.
And I don't know if it's in the rules, and I guess I should check my email, but I don't know that I'm going to be able to read it that quickly anyway. So maybe you don't know the answer.
25% match is in the statute.
Yeah, that's just part of the contract. That's not the certification process.
Right.
Right, and this is Sue, and we know that part of the certification process is going to go into rules, right, Bobby? We just haven't seen the draft yet for that.
Yes, that's correct.
So that will certainly be something.
Because the Early Learning Division has to monitor then some, because of the accountability, some of this will be in the rules, yes.
Right. So
I've not heard these questions before, and we'll raise them. The question that I'm hearing is, it's beyond the 25% match. It's the price to a community to begin the certification process that is the question, that communities have perceived as a barrier to getting a relief nursery. Carmen and Kelly, did I get the question correct?
Yes, that's my question, and I think that that funding may or may not be part of our state contract. So I don't know if we have any input to that. So I don't know.
No, the way the rule is drafted, a community is certified by ORN in order to be eligible for state funding. So the fees that programs have to pay ORN in order to begin the development process, I don't think will be covered in rules. But I'm taking it as a question.
And I guess the reason I bring it up is that we're a committee about equity, and it's just concerning to me that this would be an equity issue before it even reaches us.
Hi, Bobby. This is Lillian. I'm wondering, since I don't know if everyone had an opportunity to kind of read through the whole document. As your committee was going through this, what were some of the kind of concerns or questions that were raised from your group concerning equity, knowing that y'all had you've been in this process deep, these rules intimately. So what were some of the items that, were brought to the table or people were, asking for additional kind of thoughts or ideas around?
I hate to go from memory, so I'm looking through my papers. certification was, and the certification process took, and the respective roles of the Early Learning Division and ORN were the major discussion item at the March meeting. Trying to walk this road the most appropriate way we can, with the giving accountability for fidelity to the model, to the certification process in ORN, and giving accountability for contracting and meeting certification standards to the Early Learning Division, and trying to be sure that we all understand what that means. That was a that took up the majority of the meeting, and we there were, for instance, the rules are going to contain an appeal process. So if an organization is not, just believes that they should have been certified when they are not, that there is a process, and trying to figure out who plays what roles in that process. That took a lot. There was a lot of there'll be an appeal to ORN through their process that a community thinks they should be certified, and ORN said they're not ready yet. And then, but there'll also be an external appeal process. There has to be. If we write certification into rules, the division's understanding of its legal responsibility is that we have to have an external, a public appeal process in addition to the ORN. The relief nursery people are clear in that they see certification more as technical assistance than as telling a community they can have a relief nursery or not, that their job is to get programs through the certification process rather than saying that somebody can't. So I think that's just context. That took up almost all the airtime, Lily, at the first meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Bobby, I just want to be, this is Carmen, I just want to be clear where it says in the, now I just lost it of course, where it says in the document that the relief nursery must be licensed. Are you,
Yes.
right now they're licensed as child care centers, is that going to be the same expectation but with these sort of almost amendments?
Well, the rules we're talking about are for all the services a relief nursery delivers. They are required to meet Office of Child Care regulation standards and be licensed for their therapeutic classrooms.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm thinking of the classrooms. So the classrooms are going to be licensed, continue to be licensed as a child care center.
Yes, they do.
Although they definitely, the ratios that are listed here are require higher staffing levels than a child care center.
Yes. Yes. They require higher staffing levels and I think the term that I hear most frequently them using is that trauma-informed care. So they have higher standards than licensing standards in order to serve the population that they are serving.
Okay. This is a really technical question, but do you have any idea why the age groups in the adult-child ratios don't match with the licensing age groups?
No, but it's a great question because you'll be hearing from us later this year. We're opening all the child care rules, and I'm just going to note that we should look at that because we are aligning all the child care rules, and we're trying to find these places where we have different age groups for different, and that may be legitimate, but if it's just an accident and there's no rationale for it, we're going to clean that up in the rule revision process.
Right. Yeah, that was kind of my question, was like, oh, did someone figure out something that's better, or was it just incidental?
I noticed that too.
I don't know the answer, but thank you for raising it, and that will go on the other agenda.
Okay, thanks, Bobby.
Does anyone else have any questions, comments?
Hi, Eva. This is Lenny. I'll wait for somebody else who just was there.
Go ahead, Lenny. I have questions for days.
Okay. Hi, Bobby. This is Lenny. Good to hear your voice again. Say, from an equity point of view or an equity stance, there's a couple of thoughts I have about the current rules. And let me just get back to that document. On page 6, my nickel's worth is around interface in the rule 0004. It talks about interface with the local learning hub. I would be fascinated to, from an equity point of view, when a local learning hub has its own data dashboard around race, culture, class, achievement, or opportunity gaps, how might the Relief Nursery interface or appreciate or acknowledge that those opportunity and achievement gaps start with little beepers, notably those in Relief Nurseries and other pre-K supports? Just looking for an equity interface between what the local hub is concerned about and what the local Relief Nursery is working on.
Okay, I want to be sure I get this right, Lenny. So when the rule is addresses that Relief Nurseries will coordinate with the state, with the hubs, and the hubs that cover the area in which they're working. And the question you're raising is there clarity or how is it envisioned? Maybe is this your question? How is it envisioned that the Relief Nursery acknowledge the gaps that have been identified by the hub?
Sure, there's gaps around race and culture and class. Because if you look on item C on the bottom of page 6, it talks about achievement of positive outcomes. And the Early Learning Hub probably or could have data or priorities around those kinds of achievement or opportunity gaps. As we well know in the K-12 system, as you well know, these disparities start long before kids enter kindergarten. And so I would just be looking for the Relief Nursery to be part of the overall system of appreciating and acknowledging and working on those sometimes race-based or class-based achievement gaps or opportunity gaps. Just a thought for maybe bolstering that particular part of the rule.
So bolster the part that says that they'll be part of the overall effort to address the racial, ethnic, language-based inequities.
Sure, that's great. I think that would fit nicely in the bottom of page 6, at least the copy I'm looking at from March 6th.
Uh-huh. Okay.
And then another part, I think on the bottom of page, or the midway on page 9, let me scroll to that. We're talking about therapeutic early childhood education on the top of page 9. I think it's part of sub-rule 0050. As you may know, in Gladstone and in many communities, we're working a lot on trauma-informed classrooms in schools, particularly anchored to adverse childhood experiences. It would strike me that something that you may want to add to the therapeutic early childhood education piece might be the ACE trauma-informed practices. Here in Gladstone, of course, our relief nursery is in our early childhood center, and so there's that ongoing professional development there. But I was thinking about how racism and poverty notably magnify ACE impacts and toxic stress impacts, or at least set up environments where building a high ACE score is possible or more likely. So I'm just curious, on item D on top of page 9, it would seem to me that we could bolster that again with some appreciation around race and poverty can be magnifiers to toxic stress circumstances.
And I guess I would add to that, it's the impact, the disproportional impact to children that they would receive because of their sorry, give me a moment to phrase this. It's not per se because of their race that they're, that they have a higher, likelihood to, be in these situations. It's because of the disproportional impacts that they are being impacted by society or societal institutions, things of that nature, based on systems of oppression that's putting them at a higher risk. So I'm wondering, and this is just wordsmithing, I'm wondering how, when talking about that, we can ensure that it's not, something's bad about per se someone's race or, because they're impacted by poverty, things of that nature. It's because of the systemic oppressions that's, that they're more likely to, that they're more likely to see based on these areas that, is warranting that. So that's just wordsmithing.
Yeah, yes, indeed, Lily, and that's exactly the point.
This is Joyce. I'm listening to both of you, and I agree 100% that the whole statement needs to be more reflective of specifically addressing those things that impact children based on their race, their language, even their gender. And I don't see that in here. Culturally responsive supports kind of begins to get at that, but it doesn't really specify what exactly we need to be concerned about and addressing.
Yeah, so this is Carmen. I think that I can see that in the writing of this, it's built in because the hubs are doing so much work around equity. I'm kind of guessing that in writing this, like in mentioning the hubs and in saying that the relief nurseries would work with the hubs to meet their current goals, that is an implicit incorporation of the goals that you're all describing. So I think, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, I'm just saying we can choose to ask to have it spelled out more explicitly, which I think if you're especially looking at expanding the number of relief nurseries would be a good idea, because I'm guessing things like trauma-informed practices for the people who are already running a relief nursery, when they see that, will be like, yeah, of course, just like they're seeing developmentally appropriate practices, yeah, of course. But if you're applying to be part of a contract for the first time, I think it would be important to have those things spelled out.
Yeah, exactly. I think that we can't leave anything up to chance that people will get it or that they won't get it. So to the degree that we can be explicit about spelling out those things, I think it's important.
Yeah, and I would also, I think some of the biggest questions that we have, just say in areas where we're putting kind of culturally responsive like practices and supports or things of that nature, the next question that people will ask, like, what do you mean by that? And I'm wondering how, just in general, we can help clarify some of those pieces to help talk about our stance.
Yeah, that's what I thought. I didn't take it out.
Lillian, I'm not sure I captured that. I'd like to, is it something that I should take back to the committee? I think I missed it.
What I just said?
Uh-huh.
Oh, yes. Well, I just said that one of the biggest things that we receive when someone would just say, if we say culturally responsive like practices or supports, the biggest question that I would receive next would be, what do you mean by that? So I'm wondering, just in general, clearly articulating what that could mean. It provides individuals with like a starting point, or organization with a starting point, organization moments to say like, oh, we're doing some of that. We just haven't clearly identify that as a way of, removing some of that ambiguity in that language.
So Lillian, this is Carmen. So I have a question about that, maybe in general, about the ELD's contracts now are generally, as far as I can see, are all including a request for culturally responsive services. Is there a place, or is there sort of a compilation of resources around that you're able to refer your contractors to? Because I'm thinking like, yeah, we want to have it that included as a term in all of these contracts, but we can't in every contract, spell out exactly what all these terms mean. But is there a place that you have as a division where you can point people to when they say that?
Hello?
Does that make sense?
Yes,
sorry.
I was talking and I was on mute. So the way in which we have kind of structured this conversation within the division, and the way in which I like to the division has described culture responsive kind of practices, just to start this off, it's really responding to the needs of the individual child, community, provider that's in front of you, and being able to see that child, community, provider, what have you, with a multidimensional model of who they are. I always give the example, when I walk into the space, you may not be able to see me right now. I'm a cisgender Black woman that has been impacted by poverty, that lives in the state of Oregon with its own social political contexts. So in order for practices to be culturally responsive, you need that local lens, you need that local voice, and you need the particular tools to engage in that conversation. So with some, and building off the work that many of our contractors are already doing, we have been, providing kind of supplemental tools and ways of, engaging in this conversation. So through the self-assessment tools that we are, requiring our contractors complete, that includes, kind of different follow-up pieces to the additional trainings, and that we're asking contractors to complete. It's to support contractors as they're kind of developing the supports that they'll need for their community, that, and they may have they may have different needs from community to community. So we're definitely willing and able to provide additional supports, and I think hopefully through our new website that will be released soon, as we're adding kind of additional pieces around equity, developing a section that can, help us when we're trying to provide specific examples. I hope that answers your question.
That does. That's great. Thanks. I think, often back to working with children, and sometimes we say things like, oh, use your words, and we forget to structure what that really means. And I think that I can see that being the same as as we're implementing and asking people to be culturally responsive, we need a framework for guiding people through that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've used some of the tools that you're referring to. I think that's good. I think having those additional resources like on the website and such is also great, because I can see people wanting, I don't want the equity piece itself to be a gate, to use Kelly's word, as that keeps people from actually being able to provide services that are needed because they don't understand what it is that's being asked, or they don't have the wording to show how they are doing that.
Yeah.
Or that they don't have the tool to take the next step to be able to provide that.
Well, this is Joyce, and as I'm looking at this particular section again, I look at letter B, Principles and Guidelines for Developmentally Appropriate Practices. I think that this statement D about culturally responsive supports might be strengthened if it were to read Principles and Guidelines for culturally responsive supports, so that, once again, as you were saying, Carmen, having some specific things that people can look to and be able to implement, and not have to kind of figure it out based on, this statement, culturally responsive supports, like, what is that? So I was just thinking about how to make the language more explicit and give people something that they can think, well, there are some things that I can do or look at in terms of providing the kind of culturally responsive supports that are appropriate for the different needs of children and families in our program.
One of the thoughts that's coming up, and I'd like to hear the committee's ideas on, is we do put definitions in rules. And I'm wondering, so this is broader than this set of rules. It's just a question that is whether the Equity Committee might want to work on a set of definitions that that the council might consider so essential that they go in every set of rules that have to do with equity and the kinds of things like this language, principles and guidelines for culturally responsive, that that defining some of this terminology actually in rule. You don't want to put things, you don't want to burden rules with a lot of language. I mean, you want rules to be clear.
Yes.
And you want to be able to, because you have to reopen in order to make a change. So it would only, but if there are some things that the committee considers so basic that they should be defined, I think that would be something the council would be interested in hearing.
So I have two.
This is Joyce.
This is Eva. Could whomever is not participating in the conversation mute your phone, because we're getting a background conversation. And then after whomever else would like to jump in, there's been a conversation on chat that I want to officially put on the verbal record too. So who else wanted to jump in?
I'd also like if somebody could capture that for the committee. I'd like the conversation that's going on between Lenny and Carmen. If somebody has ability to capture that in print and give it to us for the next committee meeting, that would be great.
Yeah.
I can do that for you, Bobby. This is Alyssa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This is Sue, and Lenny, I was wondering back to page 6 and your comment about how the relief nurseries work with the hubs in, identifying the populations that they and we all as a system are trying to serve. And I'm wondering, because I know I've seen you wordsmithing before, I'm wondering if you have any suggestions of wording that you would want Bobby's committee to look at back in that sort of 0040 B or C.
I think that's an interesting point, Sue. Is my mic on, I hope?
Yes.
Yes. At least I'm not as familiar with hubs across Oregon as I once was, but our local hub has 4 or 5 different strategic priorities, and I've been an advocate to argue that there needs to be some kind of evidence or at least local data analysis that says that these priorities are, at least on the face of it, or have some depth to them that we ought to pursue. So, for instance, if a local hub were to say, we really want to work on this particular circumstances where people don't have equitable opportunities or we have achievement gaps, or is a hub basically saying, here's some priorities, how does the relief nursery interface with those or support the priorities, particularly if they're around equity? I mean, happy to help, but I, again, don't know the local hub plans as well as I'm sure others.
Okay, thanks. I think it's an area where obviously every hub is different, but there are also some common baselines, common targets, metrics, and all of that. So maybe we can work on that some.
Well, Bobby, I mean, I would be curious from Lillian has probably read all the hub plans, and I would hope in each hub plan there's something in there around equity, around race, class, opportunity, achievement, whatever. And that's from our committee's point of view, trying to stay focused on those equity issues around kids and families. I'm wondering if a relief nursery could really be aware and focus on the equity question in the local hub plan.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking out loud.
Yeah, I think that would be just a nice area to kind of connect the dots, because through all of our contractors, the self-assessment that I referred to earlier in this meeting, that was completed by everyone, and within that within that process, it was starting the conversation around, kind of or continuing the conversations that many of these contractors were having concerning their areas of focus or areas that they may need kind of, additional considerations for. And I'm wondering kind of what could be additional conduits that these programs are kind of connecting over their plans and kind of talking about those areas that they identified as being kind of like priority areas that they would like to focus in on, and see what's the connection like within communities, if there is a kind of a running narrative that they're seeing between those particular areas or not, and how can they kind of work together in order to, streamline or, the areas that they would like to focus in on as a community. Hello?
Great. Anybody else have anything?
No.
Oh. Okay. Wow. I'm impressed that this conversation was this in-depth with no time to look at them previously. So I really appreciate this conversation. Bobby, do you have enough?
Yeah, well, yeah. But I mean, that doesn't mean we're not open to more. But yes, this is extremely helpful and it's very concrete. Interestingly, on the trauma-informed care, that conversation has been in front of the committee the whole time we've been, you know, for almost a year we've been beginning this work on relief nursery rules. And the question of whether we need to put that in the rule has come up over and over from the relief nursery side. So I think you've just moved it up a notch. So, but all of the comments are extremely helpful.
Great.
And this is Sue. I just want to say this is such a great example of why it's so important to crosswalk these committee work plans and to do it early. Bobby's committee, you know, meets in April in 3 weeks or something, and we'll be able to incorporate some of these comments. So your input today has been really, really helpful. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So so I do have, I like your suggestion too, Bobby, of the equity committee maybe looking at some definitions that might go into all the rules, so that we're always consistent. So I think we should probably add that to our work plan. Oh, and Lenny has just added a comment. Alyssa, can you grab that one too? Around evidence connection of equity and ACE toxic stress works that could support relief nursery growth. Great, thank you.
Yeah,
so we'll add to our work plan a discussion around what definitions that would be essential to all rules, and how that might, what that might look like. And did you give specific bullets, Bobby, around or suggestions that would be helpful?
That somebody has, I mean, I've taken notes, and I assume staff have been taking notes, and they'll all be combined. Are you thinking of a bulleted list of the issues that the committee has raised, though?
No, I was thinking just around the definitions for all rules. That.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, I didn't track. Yeah, I'm thinking of some of the language Joyce especially was articulating. Seemed like maybe they were just culturally principles and guidelines for culturally responsive. That maybe some of those were needed to be defined and used consistently. It was just a thought. I had never thought of it till today, so it's not like it's a good thought. It's just, it was like, yeah, this committee has given a lot of thought to those words and could define them more accurately. And I just thought we're trying to be, one of the council's principles is that we're consistent across rules. Not that they're all the same, but that there's a consistency, and it just struck me with equity being such a high value that maybe definitions would serve us.
Great. All right.
And can I add to that? This is Joyce, and as I thought about, that we need to make sure that the department there's consistency across the department on these definitions, because many of the programs, they interface with each other, and we want people to really begin to think about the language and the definitions and what this really means in terms of policy and practices.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about the document that there was a subcommittee of the Early Learning Council that put out something about a year ago.
Yes, the equity.
Lillian,
Yes, the equity.
You know what I'm talking about?
Subcommittee report.
Yeah, and were there some definitions in there?
Yes, within that document, there is probably a series.
That's what I was thinking. So we may not have to look far to get some definitions.
Yes, I think we well, with that subcommittee report, we definitely have a foundation for some of these definitions, and depending on like if just say like if we're adding particular groups to groups we identified as priority populations or for what we're using furthest from opportunity, then we can definitely kind of utilize those definitions as, you know, a base to build off of. But I do think this, the question around definitions, around the continuities of the definitions would definitely be helpful moving forward and bring forth some kind of, you know, consistent definitions for some of these terms,
right.
So that we can help internally and externally really kind of be intentional about what we need when we say that, because there could be multiple definitions for these terms.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you, Bobby, and everyone.
Thank you to each of you. Okay.
So
I'm going to leave.
Yes. Oh. Thanks so much.
Bobby.
Thanks, Bobby.
Thanks to each of you.
All right. So next up on the agenda, we have a couple minutes that Lillian can talk with us about the language and translation policy.
I'm literally talking with my mic off. Okay. Hi, everybody. Go into town. So before we wanted to have an opportunity. So internally, the Early Learning Division was trying to identify what could be a policy that would guide like language assistant policy that would guide the Early Learning Division and the work that they're doing in order to ensure that we're creating policies and practices that's culturally responsive and aiding us in creating materials that's coming from the division that could be that can be accessible for, you know, more individuals across the state within our across the state. So comes and from that conversation, this language assistant policy was developed. It was developed by Annie Manning in the division, and she had a work group that, you know, worked to put this forth. And one, we wanted to make sure that we are following state and federal guidelines around making sure that we're not discriminating against anyone because with limited English proficiency, and ensuring that we are producing materials in languages, whether it's interpretation or translation, that's the preferred language of the individual that's accessing that. So throughout this policy, I hope everyone had an opportunity to read that. We kind of lay down what the types of items that the Early Learning Division would want to have translated, the types of items that the Early Learning Division would like to have, like or circumstances where we were asking someone to interpret. We also identified our stance around kind of how do we evaluate that through a kind of a 4-point analysis process. So we identify the items that we're having translated, and then also kind of some of the scenarios where we're having we can have interpretation ready for particular items. And we also wanted to clearly make sure our stance around our simultaneous releasing of documents that we identified that should be translated in all 5 languages. And those 5 languages are, well, English, Chinese, Russian, Spanish, and Vietnamese. And we also wanted to state that, just say if we release something and it's not in all those languages, we wanted to ensure that we are providing notification to the public for early learning division documents that, you know, you are entitled to language assistance services and other accommodations at no cost. If you need help in your language or other accommodations, please contact us. And we wanted to ensure that this was on all documents that we deemed fit that was leaving from the early learning division, to ensure that, and then we're going to have that message translated in multiple languages as well, to ensure that, you know, parents, providers, individuals within the community, they know that not only are, you know, we're increasing our awareness around how are we providing linguistically responsive services to the field, but making sure that, you know, we actually have individuals that they can contact so that they can receive those services. And then last but not least, what I really kind of love about this policy are the responsibilities that that was articulated for the early learning division staff concerning the cultivation of like these equitable practices and utilizing this tool and process so that we can make sure that our aspirational goals for, you know, robust linguistically responsive services are actually met, because these are articulated responsibilities that we're all responsible for as a division to ensure that we are making sure that these documents are accessible to a wide audience of individuals.
That's great.
So that's yeah.
I have one question about responsibilities.
Mm-hmm.
So 4.3, ensure translation in designated target languages are released simultaneously whenever possible. So I know that previously there have been some things that came up. I'm sorry?
Sorry, what number was that? What are you?
It was 4.3 where you were on the responsibilities. Thank you. So I know that previously, I cannot remember something specifically, but you know, sometimes there are studies or questions or something that have been, well, even with the Best Beginnings questionnaire, I guess, that we just reviewed recently, like some of those are validated survey questions. So would that pertain to this, that, you know, like a direct translation might not be applicable, so we're making sure we build into the timelines that the translated questions are also considered valid for studies and data collection?
Yeah, I think I think we would definitely have to do some additional research on kind of the, you know, how do you validate questions that's translated in a different language that was not the original language in which those questions were tested in, to have them originally validated. I think there probably would be some research around that. But I think with like the translation of any document, if we did a word by word translation, it's just wouldn't make sense. So I think there has to be, as long as we're reviewing them and have the linguistically diverse individuals that can provide us with their expert opinions on it. I think that we would have space in order to, you know, have those items translated in a way that would, you know, clearly articulate the intention of the question, rather than us getting kind of caught up in the word by word translation, because, you know, in some cases it would, you know, and negatively impact the actual intention of the question, because it wouldn't make sense.
Correct. I think I don't remember specifically when like, I just remember it's been an issue previously, but I can't remember specifically what about. So I'm sorry I can't provide an actual example. Anybody else have any questions, comments?
I have
Kelly,
a question. Oh, go ahead, Kelly.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, my question is about 3.43. Translations must be completed by a qualified translation vendor approved by the Oregon Department of Administrative Services Procurement Office. I guess I would like this to say when are you talking about? Does this mean anything that comes out of the Early Learning Division office, or does this mean any any program that utilizes Early Learning Division funds?
No,
I'm concerned because we translate all the time, but it doesn't clarify here.
Well, this document is directed internally for the Early Learning Division. So I definitely think contractors, if they want to use this as a template or something, they can use it, but this is specifically for the Early Learning Division, and this particular one is pertaining to for our vendors that are the vendors that the Oregon Department of Administrative DAS has identified as translation and interpretation companies that has contracts with the state. So you'll see that the language within this document is internally facing for the Early Learning Division.
Okay, so that just means that anything that I receive as a hub, anything that I receive from the Early Learning Division translated, I'm confident that it's good because you've gone through this process.
Yes, and I mean, in just additional background around this. So for all of the languages that we identify that we would like to translate in, for example, for translation, Annie also developed kind of a vetting process where we sent out test documents to all of the companies that the DAS had. We internally vetted them and then identified particular translation companies that we would like to use for particular languages. So, you know, for Vietnamese and Chinese, they may have a different company compared to Spanish and Russian, based off of that, based off of the, you know, kind of the vetting process that we did internally to identify the company that was turning in the most consistent kind of, you know, professional translations for different languages. So we've done our, Annie has definitely done her due diligence in kind of identifying a process so that we can make sure the materials that are going out are as accurate as possible, with the understanding that, you know, there's different ways that people like to phrase things or different vocabulary terms that they would like to use, but we're trying to identify how do we make sure that these translations are as, you know, are understandable and as high quality as possible, because they're being translated from an English language document. You know, they're not actually being written based off of the language in which we're trying to translate them in. So there's going to be moments where, you know, it could be a little bit clearer, but we're trying to make sure that it's as good as possible.
And the oral interpretation is really only around the need when someone calls in or you have a meeting or such, so you don't need such qualifications for your interpretation services.
Well, yeah, because for example, like within the division or like across multiple state agencies, we have bilingual, multilingual staff that, you know, they have been identified from the state as being able to competently interpret when needed based on requests. And then we also have access within the division, a language line. So if someone calls in and, for example, if they speak Mai or a Somali dialect, we can access the language line to provide us with additional support to help us, you know, have that conversation interpreted so that we can, you know, walk through different documents or different, you know, questions that they have.
Yeah, and again, this is a service that's provided from the Early Learning Division out, so it's not really, these services aren't services for hubs to access for their programs. That makes sense.
Yeah, and you would be correct at this point in time, because we don't have the capacity to like send out interpreters or things of that nature from an early learning staff across the state for that reason.
Yep, that's good. Thank you very much.
Carmen, you had something?
Yeah, my question is about how this will be funded. So a lot of the translation that happens is paid for by the R&Rs. Because when we receive things and then when we receive documents that aren't in all 5 languages, then we translate it in order to give that information to the child care providers. And that's part of our role, is to provide that communication service to them. So, like, for example, like explaining how the different ways are that you can take the online health and safety training that's required, and explaining like who has to take that and who doesn't have to take that. And then explaining when the deadline is and if the deadline moves and all of those things. So I guess my question is, going forward and implementing this, do you see that there would be additional funding to pay for the translation of the documents that we're talking about?
You mean, sorry, can you kind of clarify the questions?
So, like, for example, I have, we have a document that's about the basic requirements for and regulations for a child care provider who is not related to all the children that they take care of, who receives DHS payments, versus when they are a close relative of the children that they're taking care of. And that kind of information needs to be available to many different groups of people and many different language groups. So that is something that has been translated through the R&R system as part of our contract. Mm-hmm. Is the state going to start taking that cost, or is it going to stay in the R&R system and be translated before it comes to us now? Like right now, some of the things that we receive, they're in English and then we translate it. Mm-hmm. So am I understanding correctly that the state is going to start translating those things and then delivering them to the community and contractors?
No, there will be, there will be particular documents that's coming out of the division that we would identify, and at the end of this, there's references to like an appendix that's being developed, that how we identify the documents that we're translating, documents that we're not translating and find interpretation for. Okay. We're going to have that process. However, that does not, that's not going to kind of remove translation that would probably happen, or that would happen within different contracting groups across the state. Different contracting groups across the state concerning documents that they will need to translate for the communities that they're serving.
I'm wondering if there are cases where contractors are not able to meet these requirements because they're not funded to. Okay. Like I'm thinking about smaller R&Rs. Where they might have like a new influx of like Russian writers, or maybe there's a new influx of Somali-speaking people, but hasn't been in their contract in the past to have that translation cost covered, and now it is there because of changing population.
So I guess two pieces. So for this policy, it's internally facing for the early learning division, and it's not something that we are requiring our contractors to comply to. This is a policy.
Right. Internally. But sorry, I definitely wasn't clear. But my point is that if you're not translating it, then the people that you're sending it to may not be able to translate it either. And I'm not saying translate everything into every language. I'm just thinking aloud about the set of things that you determine to be this needs to be translated.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering how we how we check and how we have a feedback loop that ensures that.
Yeah, and I definitely think that is, as we're like evolving in this conversation, something that we need to kind of keep an eye on. One, for like the division to clearly articulate from the documents that they're sending out, here are the particular documents that we are translating. And I think also just say for our different contracting groups, how do we, you know, maximize the resources that is available to say like, hey, if this particular document, we would like this document to be translated, and it could be used across, just say like a series of, you know, CCR&Rs or relief nurseries, you know, how are we, if, and this is the same document, what's the conversation that could be kind of developed around, let's not duplicate efforts, let's,
Yes.
let's have these documents translated, but, you know, do it at one time so there's consistency across, you know, the document that's being translated, and it can be utilized by everyone. And I'm wondering, how do we kind of enter into those conversations around documents that we have to get translated and that we know multiple contractors will probably be translating? How do we kind of, you know, pool resources in order to do that more efficiently and effectively?
Mm-hmm.
So Lillian, what would be the process, or what are the next steps to have that happen? Because that just makes so much sense to save time and money by doing some of the translation centrally in the ELD office rather than by 8 different CCR&Rs or hubs or whatevers. So how do we make that happen?
Well, like I said, there is a process that we use internally to identify those documents that we would be translating in multiple languages, and if they're not being translated, we're including that message on the bottom so that providers, community members can call, so we can utilize a language line or other services in order to help serve them, to walk them through the document. So we have that process. So it's based on that process that we identify the documents that we will be translating and will not be translating. However, this policy is not meant to replace the translation and interpretation kind of responsibilities that our contractors have across the state, because, you know, to take that on would, you know, that would not be financially feasible with the budget that we have in order to translate all these documents like in-house. And there will be particular documents that we produce that, you know, like I said, via that process that we identified with kind of the 4-point verification on like the items that we are identifying as needs to be translated by our office and doesn't need to be translated by our office. You know, we're trying to balance out the increasing linguistically diverse individuals with accessing materials with our financial realities to identify kind of what that line is.
So is there a list that you could make available of what documents the division has translated and has said need to be translated, so the division did it? Is there just sort of a master list of what those are and in what languages?
Well, yeah, we have for the documents that we have translated, there's a list of documents that we have translated, but that's not that it wouldn't be a list of every single document that's ever been like put out to the field from the early learning division. It would just clearly articulate, hey, like for example, from the Office of Child Care, if we had a compliancy letter or things of that nature that we translated for a provider or as a template, we would have, you know, kind of a list of those items, which we also include on our website as well for individuals to access them for most of those documents.
So the documents that the division has translated are available on the website, our website.
Yeah. the publicly facing one. So if we just say, for example, we translated a document that was not public facing, or if it was a letter that had to be sent to an organization or a provider or things of that nature, those items would not be on the website. But all of our publicly facing documents that we have translated, we put most of them on the website. And yeah.
Okay.
So if nobody else has any questions or comments, we can certainly revisit this, but I wanted to be mindful of time. It's 10:53. Does anybody else have anything pressing on this issue?
This is Kelly. I just wanted to say, just ask about the intent, and there's probably a really quick answer, Lillian, is that, so is the intent here that everything that comes out from the division is culturally and linguistically ready for local people to implement? If you're sending out a document, that when you send it out, it's going to be translated or be culturally appropriate for us to use as it comes out. I mean, that's the intent. I guess when I looked at this and I saw key documents, I assumed that most of the documents that come out of the Early Learning Division are key documents, and that most of the documents that you will send out to us will be available in multiple languages. So I guess I'm just asking about the intent. That doesn't mean that everything's ready to go now, but the policy is saying that from here out, we're going to translate all, I'd like to use the word all, the documents that are pertinent to our work with multicultural and multilinguistic populations.
And yeah, and like I said earlier, we identified a process that's going to help us like select the items that we're going to be able to translate and release simultaneously. And yeah, so we identified a process. I mean, in a ideal world, I would, we would love to be able to, translate everything that we send out of our office. However, that's not the world in which we live in. So we're trying to identify a process that would help us select those documents that we would be translating on a division level. And we're releasing whether that's, and again, like in this this policy it's internally facing, so these are for documents that we would have to, that would be publicly facing, and documents that would not be publicly facing. So we're trying to identify a process that can help us select those items that we'd be translating and releasing internally and externally, in a way that, we're trying to reach as many individuals as possible. And for the documents that we can't translate, we're trying to identify different ways that the Early Learning Division can provide like kind of language assistance through some of the, some of the services that we have accessible to us.
I just want to, when you're looking at policies, we also need to understand the intent of the policy, and I think that you're, I trust your intent. And I think the policy is good, and I think that we are going to learn as we go how to be supportive of each other to make sure that we get what we need.
Yeah.
I like the policy. I think you've done a great job, but I mostly appreciate what you're trying to get done.
Yeah, and I think also looking at our like kind of our contractors and our fellow especially our contractors out in the field, because in many of these cases, y'all are well ahead of us in the policies and practices. So it's been really, it's been a really great process, like learning about some of those and figuring out how we at a state level catches up to the culturally responsive and linguistically responsive services that are already existing in many communities across the state. So we're looking for ideas as well. So if you know of any, or if you have any kind of additional feedback that we can add to this, we're definitely all ears, because we've been learning a lot from our contractors as we have been developing this.
Great. So I'll point to Lenny's chat again. He suggested partnering with the local food pantries, because they are a great resource in Gladstone and Oak Grove area. So we're at 3 minutes. Is there anybody from the public that needs to give comment? I have not been good about asking for public comment. Okay, I'm not hearing anybody. So the last thing that was on our agenda, which I closed, oops, was to advertise our spaces on the council. We have quite a few vacancies. I'll send out the link to the equity implementation committee membership, and even some of the seats that have names under them, we still do have some vacancies there as well. So I encourage anybody who is interested in participating in the committee and applying for it to follow the links that are available for submitting an application, and I'll send that out to everybody so that we can hopefully get more participation statewide from our committee. I really appreciate the conversations that we had today. They were fantastic as usual, and yeah, I can't even begin to express the admiration I have for all of you for being able to tackle issues on the fly. Does anybody else have anything?
Nope.
Great. Well, hopefully I will get you all some information in a more timely manner for our April meeting, and I look forward to that. Thanks again, and we'll see you in April.
Have a good day, Eva. This is Joyce.
Thanks, Eva.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Sue, Eva, can you stay on for a moment?
Yeah. You want to stop recording too?
Okay.